Well, good morning, everybody. Thank you for joining us for today's webinar on private partnerships for lunar landers. My name is Brian Berger, and I'm the editor-in-chief of SpaceNews. We've put together a panel discussion today to explore NASA's Human Lander System program in a little more depth. As some of you may know, NASA has taken a sort of non-traditional approach with getting these landers into development. They've taken a public-private partnership approach, and they chose 3 teams to begin developing these landers in earnest. And they made those selections just in the past month. We have some representatives of 2 of the 3 winning teams here with us today, and we have Tommy Sanford from the Commercial Spaceflight Federation. Your moderator for today is SpaceNews senior staff writer, Jeff Foust. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to him. Jeff?
Thanks, Brian. Thanks for everybody for tuning in on a Friday and taking a break probably from binge watching Space Force on Netflix to learn about real efforts to go land on the moon. As Brian mentioned, it's been a month since NASA announced the 3 teams that have been selected by NASA for the Human Landing System, or HLS contracts, Blue Origin, Dynetics, and SpaceX. We have Andy Crocker, who is the Deputy Program Manager for the HLS program at Dynetics. We have Seamus Tuohy, who is the Principal Director for Space Systems at Draper, who is involved on both the Dynetics and the Blue Origin team. And we have Tommy Sanford, who is the Executive Director of the Commercial Spaceflight Federation, which represents several dozen companies and organizations in the space industry, including many of those involved in the HLS program. So with that, let's get started. Andy, congratulations on winning the one of the HLS awards. It's been a month since NASA made the announcement. What's happened in that month since the NASA announcement? You need to unmute, Andy. There you go.
There we go. Got to unmute phone in. There we go. Can you hear me?
Yes, can.
Excellent. All right. Well, thanks very much. Yeah, we're obviously really excited to be working the program. Yeah, the award was just over a month ago, and we actually got under contract about 2 weeks ago. We've been furiously bringing in employees and getting subcontractors started at a rapid rate. But I can say that both NASA and our team are really locked in. We hit the ground running. I can tell you that NASA was very prepared. They have lots of folks who are involved in this already and had a very well thought out plan. So in the time since we've been on award, and even really before that, since right after the award was announced, we've been spending lots of effort getting aligned, our team and NASA's team, not just on processes and expectations, but also deep technical nitty-gritty details. I think NASA's learned a lot of great lessons from recent programs, particularly Commercial Crew, on what helps a team move fast and what things can cause the program to slow down. And they're really focused on implementing processes early that can help us move fast.
Great. Can you give an example of some of those processes, things that you're doing? Because you're actually, this is a fairly quick turnaround effort, 9 to 10 months for this initial phase of the HLS program.
Right. So there are a lot of things going on in parallel, as you can imagine, as there will be through the whole program. But we're starting updating our design. We came in with a design, obviously, in the proposal, kind of a conceptual design, and we're starting the process to update that. But there's a lot of focus right up front on aligning ourselves with respect to the requirements and the standards that we're going to follow. I think that's something that has come up a lot in Commercial Crew is having to deal with that later in the program when a lot of things have already been done, and that can cause things to slow down. So NASA has really made a concerted effort to address those things up front and get us all on the same page with respect to the standards we're going to follow, how we're going to follow those standards, the requirements that are flowing down, how we're going to address those requirements, how we're going to verify those requirements. So we think that's a really smart thing to do. It's a lot of effort. It's a lot of hard work, and we're really putting a huge amount of effort into trying to get that done just in the first few months of the program. But we think it's a smart thing to do, and it'll be well worth the effort.
One of the things that stands out about the Dynetics Award is the size of the team. You've got about 25 different companies and organizations involved, and maybe you can talk a little bit about how you assembled such a large team and that particular philosophy of bringing together a large group rather than a smaller number of companies.
Right. Yeah. So first of all, we knew going in that we were eventually going to get to a large team. Looking back at the Apollo days, there were hundreds of companies and hundreds of thousands of people involved in the program. And even though we're more technologically advanced today, it doesn't mean that that's going to change hugely. We also went into this with eyes wide open with respect to what our strengths and weaknesses were. And we knew to have any credible chance of getting a contract, we would have to bring in teammates who could complement us, but then also fill our gaps, bring in strengths where we had weaknesses. And so that was really our target. The other thing is that we knew from the beginning that this would be a very fast-paced program, and that we needed to have teammates who could help our team be successful in staying fast. We believe we come in with an ability to move fast, but we needed teammates who could help us with that. We also knew that we couldn't rely on any one company. We couldn't rely on Dynetics alone. We couldn't just have 2 or 3 teammates that each had a large burden of the program. We wanted to have companies not only that could move fast, but that had expertise, strengths that they could focus on, and then we wouldn't ask them to do more than what we knew they were capable of. So we targeted companies with strengths in certain areas and have given work to those companies that are very focused on what they've demonstrated in the past, what they brought to the table. And so we don't rely on any one company, but we have people working in their wheelhouse, so to speak. Obviously, we know that bringing in a lot of companies does bring challenges. It brings challenges from a management perspective. But at the same time, as I said, we knew going in that we would eventually have lots of teammates. And why wait to get a lot of those critical teammates on board when you can identify them up front, make sure that they're on your team instead of somebody else's team, but also get the right ones. We wanted to have the companies that shared our ability to move fast, that shared our values, that shared our passion for this mission, and we believe we did that.
Great. Well, one of those partners is Draper. And Seamus, maybe you can talk a little bit about what you're offering for the Dynetics team, and also what you're doing, if it's similar, for the Blue Origin team.
Well, as Amy talked about sticking in your wheelhouse, Draper's wheelhouse for a long time has been guidance, navigation, and control systems and human-rated computer systems like we designed for Cygnus, we designed for Dream Chaser. So we're taking that technology and applying it broadly to all of our lunar landing programs. You talk about the suddenness of HLS. We feel we've been sprinting now for about 10 years on lunar landing, lunar operations. Ever since the Google X Prize, we were one of the teams on Google. We had Next Giant Leap that we were a big principal on. And we realized what kind of technologies we would need to develop in order to make landing more safe and more routine, more commercially viable. So we made major investments years ago in preparation for this. And so we didn't just start, last month. We've been doing this for about 5-6 years now. No let up, no let up. We have landers now that we're supporting for commercial ventures for like iSpace, a Japanese partner. That could be as early as next year. And so we're looking at a cadence of we could have lander programs every year from now, starting in 21 to 22, 23, 24. And so to prepare for that, we've been working a long time. But it's primarily precision landing, hazard detection and avoidance, the human system interface of how the crew interacts with the GNC system if there is a crew on board, and the highly reliable and fault-tolerant computer systems that we traditionally do.
Yeah. And so is it a case where companies were reaching out to you, or you were reaching out to companies to participate in their lander proposals?
Well, it's always both, you know, and it's great when you have a mutual interest. You know, Blue and Dynetics, we have a long history with. We've worked on programs with them in the past, and found they're great partners and a good fit for us. You know, we're usually a good fit for companies because, you know, we're an interesting organization, that we're a nonprofit, but we still do, you know, advanced development and operation, put things into operation. So reason we're a good fit is we stick to what we do. We have an idea of what we're good at. We have an idea of what our heritage is, and we can be very cost effective. So we're usually very good to provide that critical capability. And in this case, obviously it's the landing G and C for us.
Great. Tommy, you know, a lot of mention about this being a public-private partnership and building on some of the lessons of the previous ones, like commercial cargo and crew. What lessons do you see in particular that NASA has incorporated from those earlier programs into HLS? And is there anything that, that they should have incorporated perhaps, but at least have not so far?
Well, Jeff, thanks for the great question. I think they've incorporated quite a few of the lessons learned from previous public-private partnerships. But I just want to take it back one more step, that I think they've also applied lessons learned from Apollo, the shuttle, and the ISS. Ever since the end of, or even right before the end of Apollo, NASA has been trying to achieve sustainable development and operational costs for human spaceflight. That's sort of been, you know, what we've all been after. Because during Apollo was unsustainable from a cost perspective, and that bore out with 7 out of the 9 years that followed President Kennedy's Rice speech in 1961. NASA spent over 50% of its budget on Apollo programs, and it peaked out at 70% in 1967. So they tried to address that issue with the shuttle, both with sustainable development and operational costs. Unfortunately, that did not work out, even though it was a wonderful technically advanced vehicle, and did a lot of amazing things. It never achieved those 2 goals. The same could be said with the ISS. And so really, I would argue that the public-private partnerships grew out of NASA learning those lessons from those previous human spaceflight programs to try and achieve the 2 top goals of sustainable development and operational costs, where you don't have to, and you don't have the opportunity to these days, to spend more than 50% of NASA's budget on human spaceflight. I think by applying those lessons to HLS, it's really allowing and enabling NASA to go back sustainably. But there are a number of lessons learned from the crew and cargo programs that I think they're applying and have been mentioned already, but just want to foot stomp those. One being that NASA learned with both commercial crew and cargo programs the importance of setting up clear and well-articulated performance-based requirements at the start of the program. That's one of HLS's top goals, one of its 2 top goals for the 10-month contract in the first 3 months. The other one being that early engagement with industry. NASA learned with both commercial crew and cargo the importance of establishing an integrated NASA industry team at the beginning of the program to build a sense of mutual trust. And then a few other things being the lessons learned of having dissimilar redundancy and the importance of that playing out for not only competition and keeping costs low for development and operational costs, but also avoiding the operational problem of relying solely on the shuttle to launch and assemble the ISS, where when something does go wrong, that you have other options to continue operations and that you don't stymie the program.
Great. I know one of the criticisms from some in Congress about the use of the partnership model is that with commercial cargo and crew, there are obvious commercial applications of those systems. And we've certainly seen that with the success, say, the Falcon 9 has had on the commercial launch market, or some of the Crew Dragon customers that SpaceX has signed up. The commercial applications for human lunar landers seem less obvious, at least in the near term. Is that a fair assessment? Is that a fair criticism?
No, I don't think so. I think that is I think that's a red herring. Getting into the semantics of what is commercial and what is not commercial. I think the results speak for themselves, and the results are really good when you use competitive fixed price contracts that are performance based. And I think that getting into a discussion of what is commercial and what is not is very academic, and I think it's meant to again be a red herring and avoid the real discussion of what these types of partnerships result in. And that's what they should be assessed on, and is the merits, not semantics and wordplay.
All right. I'm going to turn back to Andy. I mean, you presented a very innovative lander design with the proposal you submitted for HLS, and some of the things that really stood out was the design of the crew cabin being very low to the ground, so it's easy to get to the surface, and the sort of this these tanks and thruster systems. I wonder if you talk a little bit about the process that went into the design of the lander that you were developing for your proposal, and maybe anything that's changed since you submitted that proposal a few months back.
Right, yeah. So I want to pull on something Tony said, because I think he was absolutely correct in that there's a real focus on sustainability, and I think it's a good focus. I think it's a healthy focus for this program for the future of Artemis. And we really took that to heart from the beginning. We really worked at coming up with a design for the lander that we felt like could be used for things beyond carrying crew. Obviously, carrying crew and getting them there by 2024 is the primary mission at this point. But for this to be a sustainable program, the lander has to be able to do other things. It has to be able to carry other payloads. It has to be able to be reusable. It has to have potentially lots of uses. And so we really spent a good bit of time looking at different approaches that could enable that sort of sustainability. Another big factor for us was crew. The fact that we really wanted to be focused on what the crew needed. And once we sort of came up with a general approach that we felt like could be sustainable and reusable, we really spent a lot of time thinking about what the crew really needed, what the crew may want. And obviously there's a lot of work yet to do in working with NASA Johnson and with potential crew members on what the specifics of that design will be. But those were big drivers for us. And then finally, we all know that the budget isn't always what you hope it will be. And so we tried to make our design one that could be robust as possible, at least, to the changes in budget availability. And we really targeted having our lander be reusable from as early on as possible. So we really believe that we've got a design that has that potential. Whether it's can be reused after the first flight, we've targeted that, but we'll see if that works out with NASA's plan. But we believe that very early on we'll have a reusable system. That itself will make for a much more affordable program and hopefully a sustainable program. With respect to changes, there really haven't been a lot, honestly. We submitted a proposal back in early November. We were on a study with NASA under what was called Appendix E that finished up in early February, and we're able to kind of fine tune some things there. But honestly, we've really kind of been preparing ourselves to get to work with NASA, and we know we'll have changes. We know some of the requirements will be tweaked. Some of the standards will drive us in slightly different directions. But we really believe we have a good baseline, a good starting point, and we're looking forward to the challenge of maturing this design.
Are there any sort of key technology areas, long lead items, things that sort of increase the development of the system that you're focusing on? I think we always know that electronics are long lead, especially spaceflight electronics, radiation hardened electronics. That's always a real challenge. And so nailing down the designs enough to be able to make those orders early is a big thing. The crew module itself is
it's a fairly specialized piece of equipment and requires, long lead material and a lot of work. And so it's certainly schedule critical. But there are a number of technologies. It's such a complex system. There are a number of technologies that have to basically draw a line in the sand here within the next few months, and certainly in this period. And that's going to be the design that we move forward with. Fortunately, as Seamus said about Draper, and I think it's true about a number of our teammates, there's a lot of great work that's been done over the last decade plus, several decades, that have advanced a lot of these technologies and now is really a great time to take advantage of those, and we believe they'll be ready. But we have to draw that line and really start to implement those into our system very, very quickly.
Seamus, you mentioned or alluded to this a little earlier on with your work on other lander systems. You're part of NASA's Commercial Lunar Payload Services, or CLPS program, for robotic lunar lander services. Can you give an update on where things stand with that, and how has that informed your work on HLS?
Sure, but before I go into that, I'd like to build on something Tommy said, about, the commercial viability of NASA's approach. I think if it was just a repeat of Apollo, like a vertically integrated singular type of mission, I think you could criticize it. But CLPS is one of the examples of why it's completely different. CLPS is going to produce a capability, for the country and for commercial entities, for small, medium, and HLS will produce large cargo landers. And so this idea that to get sustainable presence on the surface of the moon, it requires logistics. Logistics requires a large number of different types of vehicles to be able to do it. So I think CLPS is actually very, very important to the future of HLS, the future of human operations and commercial enterprise for the moon. So how it's going is there was originally 9 teams awarded IDIQ, indefinite delivery, indefinite quantity contracts. Essentially, it's a license to propose. They were in the small lander size. We're one of those. And then the list of 9 was expanded by 5 additional companies who came in with medium-size types of landers, things that could carry 500 kilograms. So the small landers carry about 100, the medium carry about 500. Some of the teams can do both. We're concentrated more on the small side. There have been 2 opportunities that have been awarded to Astrobotic into Intuitive Machines. Got the original 2, and then Maston just recently won an award. And so the beauty of that was it wasn't just like one of the large primes just dominated and won every single award. There are now 3 different companies with diversity of technology and approach and designs. And so we hope that all will be successful, because the survival of CLPS builds on success of our not really partners, frenemies kind of thing, that we hope that all the teams are successful, because then it provides NASA a requirement to keep funding those types of missions because they've been successful. We're waiting on the medium class, the first medium class award. This is to carry the Viper rover produced by NASA. So it's more of a larger capability. We hear those awards will come out in June. So the proposal's already in and being evaluated. And we hear another RFPs coming out, in a few months. So one of the beauties of CLPS is that there's a cadence. It isn't a one-time you propose, you win or lose, and everything goes away. It's, in order to stay in the game, you have to keep your teams going. You have to keep your designs evolving. You have to keep maturing your designs. The best way to do this is to actually have a commercial type of development where NASA's not the only customer. So if NASA's the only customer for CLPS, it's not going to succeed. The reason Astrobotic, got the award, they were most mature. They had years of investment, private investment that went into that. Same thing for Intuitive Machines, same thing for Maston, same thing for us. So CLPS is if commercial crew and commercial cargo and HLS are public-private partnerships, CLPS is almost like public-private partnerships on steroids. That it really is NASA trying to utilize commercially available vehicles. The The teams that are most resilient, I believe, will be the ones that look at CLPS as being an opportunity to get additional work, as opposed to it being the be-all, end-all contract to go after. The teams that will survive, the teams that will make it, are the ones that have other missions that they're doing that are paid for by commercial customers. Or, really unique, is the ability to split payloads, where NASA says, carry this kind of box for us, and if your lander is capable of carrying more, well, NASA's not the only customer for that landing mission. You sell the other payload space to a commercial customer, and so NASA's not paying 100% of the development. They're not paying 100% of the mission cost, and it's a very cost-effective way of doing it for NASA. Because 3 teams have been awarded, and a lot of the teams are still proposing, I see that there's a great diversity in approach. If one design turns out to be very strong, it will succeed and succeed and succeed. If one design turns out to be non-robust, it'll go away. I think it's critical to our future plans of expanding human presence to the surface of the moon. I think we have this really routine and reliable logistics capability. When you add in the next few years, after the first CLPS landers go and successfully land, the ability to return things, now you're talking a completely different situation. Now commercial companies who aren't space companies, but they're making money type of companies, have a system that they can rely on that can get to the moon, deliver things, and also get product back if they need it for their business model.
Great. Tommy, Andy referred to earlier the challenges of budgets, and with your ear to what's going on in Capitol Hill in these unusual times, I wonder if you have any insights on the prospects for funding for the HLS program or any other policy issues that the program may be facing in the coming months.
Yeah, that's a great question, Jeff. Thanks for asking. I'm very optimistic about the funding for returning to the moon, the Artemis program, and HLS. I think we've seen, except for a few small corners, significant support, bipartisan support, robust support, bicameral support for Artemis and a return to the moon and HLS. And I think that's going to continue. I think that NASA's doing a great job of responding to and addressing some of the criticisms that have come from some of the authorizers on the Hill regarding the program with the 10-month award and HLS regarding both the amount of insight that NASA has into the program, and then as well as the closeness of their partnership with industry, which I think Andy and Seamus did a great job of laying out. So I'm very optimistic about where things are heading, and I think that we've got a good chance of getting the funding necessary.
Great. And you see any other any insights basically on just how this will play out? Because we're not, the appropriations process is very unusual this year because of all the challenges caused by the pandemic. Are we going to have an appropriations bill, or are we just going to have a CR?
I think it's quite likely, and for us to have a CR, at least for the election, which I think we've seen play out as a pattern over previous elections for the last decade. And then after the election is over and the dust settles, you normally see the appropriators in Congress adjudicate the differences between the appropriations bills that they worked on for that FY year or the next FY year after the election and signing that into law early in the new year. So I expect that same process will play out.
All right. Seeing some questions coming in, feel free to submit your own through the Q&A option here on Zoom. While those are coming in, I wanted to ask a question maybe all three of you can address. The use of the partnership model over a more conventional contracting mechanism, whether it's cost plus or fixed price or something like that. What do you see as sort of like the biggest benefit and also sort of the biggest challenge towards that approach as applied to the HLS program as you individually see it? Maybe Andy, we'll start with you.
Sure. Yeah, you know, it's really interesting to look at the contractor teams that were selected. Just like the 3 HLS contractor teams have very different design approaches, it seems like the 3 teams may also have different approaches to public-private partnerships. Dynetics' approach to public-private partnerships is focused on partnership. That is, we embrace the idea of broad and deep collaboration with the government. Dynetics has a history of collaborating closely with our customers, and in the case of HLS, we really strongly believe that it's critical to achieving the program goals safely, on budget, and on time. Generally, our approach with the government is very open. We tend to share with our we share with our government customers readily. We believe that if the government pays for it, the government has a right to use it. So, you know, NASA's certainly our customer, and as it has the ultimate responsibility for certifying our system for human spaceflight. With NASA in that role, we have a comprehensive approach that we've really already started implementing with NASA to provide insight into our progress and our processes on a daily basis. They're part of the sausage making. And by being that closely involved, NASA not only knows about the issues as soon as they arise, but they can use their expertise to help come up with solutions. And by being directly tied in, those solutions can be developed quickly. On the other side, NASA is also very much our partner. You know, in that public-private partnership, they are very much a partner. And in fact, NASA specifically established a robust methodology for industry collaboration through both government task agreements, which are fairly common, and providing many subject matter experts to sit directly with our industry teams, which is pretty innovative.
All right, Seamus?
So I think when you look at public-private partnerships, I mean, they're all different to the situation. You know, it's not one size fits all. I mean, there's still room to do cost reimbursable contracts. There's still room to do public-private partnerships that require, you know, development investment by the government. That's what the cargo and crew programs and HLS. And the other ones like CLIPS that the government's not paying any development for. It's all just, you know, for the mission and operations. And it all depends on what's being asked for by NASA. You know, if it's something that's so unique to NASA, and it's like a science mission, that's a one-off, go do an investigation, you know, unless there's some other commercial opportunity, it doesn't seem like a public-private partnership would be a good thing to do. You know, but if it's something like CLIPS or any kind of other test services, you know, where the company is built into their business model that they make their money back on services and operations, then it's a very good model. And, you know, the hybrids are the ones in between, like cargo and crew and HLS, where, you know, it's not like, you know, NASA is going to fund, you know, a portion of the development, but because of the fixed price nature, that gets capped, and the risk is alleviated from the partner by being able to make money on the services. So just saying public-private partnerships, there's many different flavors of how you would do it. So I would hate to see that everything in the future becomes a public-private partnership, because I don't think that's good. And I'd hate to see everything revert back to, you know, a full cost reimbursable government development, because that may not be the best way. So I think it's nice in that it's an additional contracting mechanism to apply to different opportunities when it's the best solution.
All right, Tommy?
Again, another great question. I see several benefits. I see affordability, sustainability, and utilization. Regarding affordability, I look at the commercial crew program, and you're able to get 2 providers for a little more than $6.7 billion. which is just amazing compared to previous efforts. I think the shuttle was, somewhere around 36 billion in today's dollars to develop, and Apollo was much more. So I think there's a big benefit there. When it comes to sustainability, I think it's the same with operational expenses, much lower. There was a great analysis done a couple of years ago by a life cost analysis done by a gentleman at a Kennedy Space Center, and where he did a apples to apples comparison with shuttle when it came to cargo costs, and it showed that the commercial cargo program was providing it at about a third of the cost for about the same amount of cargo. So I think that's another benefit. Another one is schedule. When you look at from the day the contract was signed for commercial crew in September 2014 to hopefully May 2020, that's 69 months in development to getting it to operations. That's much faster than shuttle, which was around 104 months for development time from signing the contract to its first launch. So there's a significant benefit there. The other one is that it enables NASA to develop other capabilities along with the HLS vehicle, where you saw that wasn't really a thing that was able to happen with the shuttle and the ISS. You had to do one at a time. So I think that allows you to do the other things that are needed for sustainable operations at the moon, and then transitioning to Mars. And then finally, a real big key being utilization. I think you saw this with the shuttle and the ISS, is that with the high operational cost and only being able to develop one vehicle at a time, it made it very expensive and difficult to get utilization out of full utilization out of those vehicles about what was promised policy-wise to spend the money in the first place. And I think that's why you see things like, the ISS National Lab being created. So to avoid things like that, I think that public-private partnerships are very good at incentivizing companies to ensure that the utilization aspect is fulfilled as a promise. The one concern I see with this is that if there's an effort to force a down select to one provider, like there was with commercial crew, which thankfully did not go through, I think that could be concerning because a lot of the incentives and the leverage that NASA has between the competitors, I think is a bit compromised. So I'd hate to see that happen, and I hope that NASA continues to keep multiple providers all the way through to operations, and that there's not an effort to force NASA's hand on that.
All right.
And Jeff, I was just going to offer, if I can, I agree with what Tommy said, and also, what Seamus said about the contracts are not necessarily one size fits all. Certain contracting mechanisms work better in certain situations, and so in this situation where schedule is really critical, we believe that the public-private partnership is a good model. We believe that if the government and industry have the same goals, if they take the time to carefully align themselves and make sure they're rowing in the same direction, so to speak, then this type of partnership can be very powerful. And really, in fact, we believe that it's critical for us to achieve such a complex task on this type of schedule to have this partnership.
Right. You bring up a good point on the schedule that I wanted to address, is that, we've got this goal of getting people back on the moon by 2024 in the Artemis 3 mission. And does the partnership make it easier to this approach make it easier to make that 2024 deadline? Does it make it harder? Does it not make a difference? What's the key issues that you have in your mind in terms of what's required to achieve that deadline?
Yeah, I mean, you're right. And you hit on it, but the partnership is a big part of that. I think it's partnership within industry and making sure that all the companies within the industry team are working well together. But then, as I said before, absolutely the NASA as the customer and then as the partner in the collaboration role. When we looked at the schedule for this, obviously, and everybody knows it's an aggressive schedule. Like I said at the beginning, we intentionally put together a team of companies that we believe can be fast and agile. We came in knowing that we could do that based on our history, but we looked for other companies that could do the same. And we specifically found teammates. We looked for teammates that had spaceflight heritage and mature components so that we could further minimize the required development time. And that's another critical piece of it. But as you said, we believe the schedule benefits of close collaboration with the customer, the way that we set up our team, including that partnership with NASA and how we interact, will provide great benefits to the execution schedule.
All right. Anyone else want to weigh in on that?
Yeah, I'll build on what Andy said. Is that the deadline provides a focus and it changes your behavior, hopefully in a positive way. But usually with space missions, it's a build up of when you can launch. So you have a program start, and then you evaluate, okay, how long is it going to take me to do the task, and the launch date falls out of that, with margin, stuff like that. I think doing it this way, where there's a hard deadline, forces you to focus on retiring risks in a way, deploying your assets in a way that you keep to that schedule. The schedule's not allowed to move to the right, so you have to then make sure your program is set up in order to mitigate risks early, make sure that you're not caught into one path that may drive you to be late, attack the long poles in your schedule. It's a different way of thinking about it with that hard deadline. And I think it's a good challenge to have for the teams, provides focus. And what Tommy said before about, having multiple awards, I think that's critical to be able to make the deadline. Because, if you only have one team going forward, something happens. It could happen that could drive you to miss your deadline. But having two teams, it's amazing where, having that eye on your competitor causes you to maintain focus to keep your schedule in line.
Yeah, I just want to foot stop that last comment. I got a report beside me here from 2009 that NASA did, the ISS Lessons Learned and Applications Exploration report. And one of the key findings in applications exploration was related to design. And as Seamus just said, it's exactly out of this report. Human spaceflight is inherently prone to contingencies, delays, and unplanned failures. In order to meet the mission objectives, the architecture should be robust and flexible enough to take into account the potential loss of a transportation system for many months and the loss of any single deployable element. The architecture should include redundant and dissimilar critical functions, as well as alternatives to particular critical elements. So I think that this contract, public-private partnerships, is optimal to reach 2024, not only for those reasons, but also because all of the providers have done significant technology development and operations work that they're bringing to bear. So they're much further ahead than where we were with Apollo, not only as an industry, but as a community. And so I think that puts us a much further ahead and gives us a much better chance. But also by partnering with government, we can leverage the wonderful experience and knowledge that they have with human spaceflight operations, so that that industry doesn't have to relearn those hard lessons that NASA has learned and incorporated over the years. So I think it's the optimal approach.
All right, great. I want to turn to some of the questions our viewers are submitting, and won't shy away from controversy here. But the first one, it was about a week and a half ago that Doug Libero, the NASA Associate Administrator for Human Exploration and Operations, announced that he was resigning. Does that give you any cause for concern about the HLS program?
I guess I'll
put somebody on the hook.
Yeah. Go ahead, Andy.
Well, I was just going to say, certainly we aren't going to speculate about the details of it. No reason to do that, but we have been reassured by the HLS program, and we strongly believe that there's no change in momentum. There's no change in the desire or the energy behind it. That HLS is very much on, as I said earlier, locked in and moving forward. So we feel like the team is absolutely focused on this mission, and this isn't going to change that.
All right.
So
Yeah,
you hope that a program isn't dependent upon a single person. And one of the things I've been impressed with, with NASA has how quickly they've put a program management team in place to execute the program. I mean, and they've realized things like, they have a program manager for the 24 mission because that's really schedule constrained, and they have a program manager for the sustainment type of mission. So I think that with such a very strong infrastructure in place that NASA's in there, I'm still very confident that we'll go forward.
Yeah, I just want to foot stomp those last two comments that NASA's got a wonderful team, very experienced folks, and I think that this isn't going to cause any issues for the program moving forward.
All right, great. Another question. This one takes a little bit wider view than just HLS itself. What's different, if anything, from the Space Exploration Initiative from about 30 years ago, or the Constellation program, that might give Artemis a greater chance of success and even sustainability?
So I would say part of it is, Seamus, part of it is that there's still elements of Constellation there. I mean, Constellation as a integrated program went away, but the elements didn't. And so those gave building blocks, whether it's SLS or Orion, but it's also the infrastructure at Kennedy, the next generation launch system that kept going. And so Constellation was a big activity in which you had all these different elements starting up. In this case, it's more than just a lander. It's an entire enterprise that NASA's trying to develop with Gateway, and some of those building blocks have already been off and running for a number of years. And so it seems to me like it's a more robust plan to change, that it has elements that have gotten a head start than Constellation, and also I believe the funding's in a better situation. I believe there's more support. Tommy talked earlier about it, that it's not only apolitical, seems to be, but also bicameral, and the administration supports it. So it seems like there's more budget support than Constellation had.
Yeah, I agree with those points, and I would just add that I think a significant difference is in part across the portfolio, where now you have commercial providers through public-private partnerships providing more affordable and sustainable operations to the ISS. And that's enabled for new capabilities to be leveraged for things like logistics resupply to the moon, which is more affordable. Those options weren't available under SEI. As well as, again, going back to my point earlier of using, where appropriate, public-private partnerships for like HLS, where you can bring to bear the dissimilar redundancy, the competitive forces to incentivize affordable development as well as operational costs. And those options weren't available, which also allows you to develop other capabilities that NASA needs to develop in-house itself. At the same time, rather than, again, going back to the shuttle or an ISS model of you can only build one significant capability at a time.
All right, great.
Yeah.
I'm going to merge a couple of questions that have been submitted into one here, and this is primarily for Dynetics and Draper. What sort of partnership opportunities are there available, either with bringing in new companies or perhaps international partnerships with Europe or Japan, or et cetera?
Yeah, I guess I'll start. I think, let me address international first. So we actually have an international company on our team. Some folks are aware of that already, but Thales Alenia Space Italy is on our team. They're providing the primary structure for the crew module. And that was intentional because Tazi has fantastic experience, expertise in this area. They've provided very similar primary structures for other U.S. space systems. And so we were very intentional about that and sought that out, not because they were international in particular, but because they had the expertise independent of where they were located. we've had lots of conversations with a number of other space agencies and companies within other countries who are interested in either providing components to our system or potentially providing payloads in the future. And obviously, we're interested in both. Components for our system, if someone can bring a mature component that can meet the requirements, absolutely, we want to consider it. But in particular for the sustainable mission, for the long term and helping this to be an affordable program, if we have other entities from across the world, whether they're government agencies or commercial customers or whatever, bringing payloads, bringing other things to bear on this mission, that's only going to help us be successful. So, absolutely, we're open to international and have been pursuing that. With respect to joining up with a team, I think it's going to take a little while for us to get our feet under us and to get fully pointed in the right direction with the speed that we need. But once we start really bringing in the final pieces and the components and things that we need, we'll be looking out for additional help. So that time will come.
Great. Seamus,
So yes, what I would say is that the 24 mission drives you to a need to not develop new capability. So if there's a capability that none of the teammates have, obviously you need to go get it. And so there's a good opening for folks who have ready to go capability to join the 24. On the other side, for the sustainable part, that's an opportunity for organizations that have a longer view of things and where they have innovative technologies they can bring to bear to make a more sustainable operation. And it's almost like when the teams are concentrating on 24, there's also an opportunity to impact the sustainable portion of the system. It's not a guarantee that the vehicle that lands on 24 is the same exact vehicle that lands in 26, 27, 28. In fact, you hope it's not. You hope you learn something. You hope you make improvements, and you hope that it becomes something which is more efficient to operate. So I think there's a great opportunity for companies, small businesses, small organizations that do one particular thing. If it's ready to go, we're receptive to it.
All right. Another question. This is from Courtney Stad, who's got plenty of policy experience. Tommy, this might be one for you. Given the breathtaking deficits, the participants not think that Congress will be under enormous pressure to rethink investments in HLS, especially given the number of people who are unemployed? And what might happen if there's a new administration in office next year?
Oh, thank goodness Courtney asked an easy one. I was worried there for a second. That really is a great question. So I think that there are some, people could make that argument, but I would point to, when we went to the moon in the 60s, it was a very turbulent time. High unemployment, you had the Vietnam War ramping up, a number of political assassinations. The country was just very torn and in a very dark place. Yet America's political leadership saw that this was important. It was the right thing to do for the nation. It was inspirational, and to fund it appropriately. And I'm a big believer in inspiring people to do great things in their own lives and want to be a part of something bigger that the country is doing for the good of the nation. And I think that this certainly provides something like that, especially during these tough times, for people to have something inspirational to follow and be a part of. And so I would argue that that is a very good reason to fund it, and to fund it adequately. And so I'm hoping that, and we've seen this so far, that the political leadership across the spectrum has backed this program in that same sort of that spirit, and so I'm very optimistic that it will continue to get the funding that it needs. As for what happens after the election, if I knew that answer with any certainty, then I'm definitely not giving it out for free right now.
Well, we thought we'd ask.
I would say too, Jeff, on the
Sure.
on the question of why do this now. I think all of us on the phone recognize that the jobs that this kind of program creates are outstanding jobs. And on our team already we've got 19 states that are involved in this program. There's a lot of really good technology being developed. The jobs that are built and sustained with this kind of program are outstanding jobs that trickle down, through the rest of the economy and support lots of other things. So I think it's a great time for this kind of program, for the inspiration that Tommy talked about, but also just for the fundamental good work that it is. And not only is it good work, but it also keeps the U.S. At the forefront of space technology and make sure that we're going to be able to continue to be a leader in space.
All right, great. We're coming up near the end of the hour. Got one more question here, which I think is actually a good question, if a little modified here to close things out on, is what do each of you see as the biggest challenge to meeting the 2024 timeline? And I'll modify that as what gives you the confidence also that that timeline is achievable? Maybe Andy, we can start with you.
Sure. I think Tommy hit on this earlier. I think the main obstacle is the budget. Having an adequate, sustained budget for us, not only to maintain the schedule, but to be successful in general, we've got to have consistent budgets, in line with the requests that NASA's making, without gaps and with a minimum of uncertainty. And so that probably is the biggest obstacle. The confidence, I think, really comes from the way we've got our team set up, the way that we expect to collaborate with NASA, and just the interaction we've had with NASA so far in the first few weeks of the program, how not only engaged they are and passionate they are, because we knew those things would happen, but just the way that they've set it up and the way that they want to collaborate and partner with us moving forward makes us believe that the plan we brought into this on how we could achieve this mission on schedule, could actually work. And there's a mutual interest in making it work.
Seamus?
So for me, the challenges are going to be requirements and interfaces. From the high-level requirements that the team's got, you got 3 completely different architectures. And it'd be a shame that through the requirements process that those all get homogenized into an approach. I think you might inhibit some of the innovation that the teams are bringing. And then the interfaces, this is just one element of a bigger architecture, in particular for the sustained operation. Getting those interfaces solidified and kept and understood by the different elements, whether it's a gateway element or Orion or SLS or HLS or even CLIPS or things like that, they can be critical in maintaining those interfaces through the life of the program and not letting changes propagate through the entire architecture. I think would be critical to success, not only 24, but also the sustain. On the positive note, though, why I think it's doable is that a lot of the folks working on this, it's not like we just started. We've been thinking about this for years. We've been putting money into it for years. And so it's almost like this HLS award enabled us to, go from a sprint to really all out. And we really are hitting the ground running in a lot of these areas. So that gives me the confidence that, we're not spending a lot of time sitting around thinking about, oh, what are we going to do? We have an idea of what we want. We need to make sure it aligns with NASA's requirements. But I'm very confident because of the maturity of the different approaches that we'll be successful.
All right, Tommy?
I guess my top concern would be any effort to arbitrarily force NASA to down select to one provider would be a significant concern. But I think there's a lot more reasons to be optimistic and positive that this is going to happen. I think that part of it is that you have an administration from the top down that is supportive of this effort in a way that I think you haven't seen since President Kennedy and really President Johnson in the 60s of putting their money where their mouth is. I think the other aspect is you have wonderful, strong leadership and visionary leadership over at NASA, starting with the administrator down through the rest of his team, which has done a wonderful job at creating and sustaining strong support, bipartisan, bicameral support on the Hill for the program and the effort, which really makes me positive as well. And then lastly, as was talked about previously, there's just significantly more capability and innovation and technology in the industry and the community today than there was during Apollo. And so I think we're a number of steps ahead of where we were then, which gives me a lot of confidence that we're going to be able to get there. And so I'm very optimistic and positive about where we are and where we're headed.
All right, thanks, Tommy, and thanks all of you. There are a lot more great questions were submitted. Unfortunately, we don't have time to go through them all, but I want to thank everybody for tuning in and hand things over to Brian to close things out and let folks know what's coming up next in the webinar front.
Excellent. So thanks very much, Jeff. Thanks for asking such great, well-informed questions. Thanks to all of our panelists for taking time, sharing your perspective with us. And thanks to all of our participants just for showing up, helping spread the word, and also for submitting some very good questions that I think broaden the conversation. This webinar will be posted later this afternoon to spacenews.com as a video that you can watch or share, or catch up if you missed anything from the beginning. We've got a couple more webinars coming up in the next week. First up would be the rescheduled webinar with Major General John Shaw and Brigadier General Doug Scheiss. Shaw is the commander of Space Operations Command for U.S. Space Force, and General Scheiss is the commander of 45th Space Wing. Their intent is to join us the day after the Commercial Crew Demo 2 mission. That was scrubbed, so we had to scrub as well. Right now, we're tentatively rescheduled for Monday, assuming that Saturday's launch happens. Right now, the weather's not looking great. A surer bet in terms of what you can put on your calendar is our June 4th, that's next Thursday, our webinar with Colonel Eric Felt, who is the director of AFRL's Space Vehicles Directorate. He's going to talk about space technology investments for the U.S. military. He's also going to be joined by a principal investigator from the Naval Research Lab, who has a space solar power payload on X-37B, which recently returned to orbit. So registration is still open for both of those. We hope to see some of you back there. Again, thanks very much to everybody. We will see you soon. Take care, everybody.